The host of the climate realism videos that you all have seen on this Facebook and on YouTube. Today, we are bringing in Anthony Watts, James Taylor, and H. Sterling Burnett to discuss the upcoming United Nations Conference on Climate Change. How are you all?
Doing great.
Doing great. Yeah, I mean, we all just got back from
Beautiful.
ICCC 14 in Las Vegas, which was a huge success. But
it was.
Yeah, but with the upcoming climate conference, I thought now is a good time for us to all, get together and discuss how the United Nations is putting on their show, and we just put on our science-based conference, and maybe kind of compare and contrast the two in general. To start, let's just talk about you, James. You run the Heartland Institute. You were a speaker at the climate conference. How do you think ICC 14 went?
Oh, it was fantastic. It was great to have everybody back together with a camaraderie that can only occur face-to-face and live. As much as government's been telling us that we can stay in our homes and still have normal society and all that. But we had fantastic presentations. We unveiled our Climate at a Glance for Teachers and Students book that has been a tremendous hit, giving short summaries of all the various climate-specific topics. And it was wonderful to be presenting science again in a face-to-face setting.
Yeah, Anthony, I mean, you wrote much of that book. It must have been exciting for you to finally release it to the public.
Yeah, that was over a year's worth of work and preparation involved. And, on my Facebook page, I have people clamoring to get this book. They want to buy it on Amazon. They want to find out where to get it. And, we're out of print already just from what we took to the conference. So we're working on the next edition. And as soon as we get that out, we'll make it available to people.
Yeah, and for the viewers that don't know what Climate at a Glance is, essentially we took a ton of different topics that are often discussed in the media with climate change, sometimes talking about polar bears, maybe the urban heat indexes, tons of topics. And then we reduced them to one-page summaries that are both easy to understand, yet incredibly informative. It's honestly a great resource. And you can read it now at climateataglance.com. But moving forward, so COP26 is about to happen. I know, James, you are going to Scotland to speak at our rebuttal event. Originally, I was planned to go with, but passport issues may have kind of foiled my plans there. But in the previous conferences, we know that the United Nations brings people up like Leonardo DiCaprio. The most famous moment in COP history might be the "How dare you" speech. Do you guys have predictions, thoughts about how this upcoming conference will go? Is it going to be more of the same, more alarmist?
I predict that this will be a CO2 superspreader event. As much as we are lectured about how we, the little people, need to give up our automobiles, how we need to give up our heat and our air conditioning. Nevertheless, you have all of these world leaders flying on their private jets. I mean, heck, from the United States, how many different private jets will be transporting our contingent there? Joe Biden took a separate jet to Europe than John Kerry. Who knows how many other jets for the other people. And they're going to take limousines from the airport to the facility rather than mass transit, public transportation, etc. This will be the biggest super spreader event of the year. They are to blame. They are hypocritically to blame. And the fact that they would do this rather than hold a session on Zoom, I mean, they tell us we're all in agreement. We need to take all these drastic cuts. Well, then why do you need to fly from all over the world here? You can do it on Zoom. It's a hypocritical CO2 super spreader event.
Yeah, I mean, this is typical. They never hold these things in, poor cities and developing countries. They only hold them in developed world. They fly in private jets or yacht in on private yachts, right? Some of them do that. They have 5-star meals. They don't like to walk if it's raining, so they take their limos from their hotel to the meeting halls. And then they lecture us, say, don't get into a crowded airlines jet and travel for vacation, but we get to travel by private jets. It's terrible, and it's not just the politicians. The politicians are bad, but it's also the people like Greta. Greta didn't make her "How dare you" speech at the last climate thing. She did it at the UN and or before Congress, I believe. And she's not going to get there in public transit, and yet she's going to be there again. A 17-year-old lecturing the world because she knows climate science. There is no climate science done at these events, and that's a big difference between what goes on at the ICCC events and what goes on at COP26.
Yeah.
And that's because they believe the science is settled. We don't need to discuss science anymore. Now it's just forcing people, not us, other people, to live simpler lifestyles, poorer lifestyles, turning up our heat during the summer, turning up our air conditioning during the summer so we don't get as cool, turning down the heat during the winter so we don't warm it up as much, living without private cars, or jet travel. They want to tell us how to live. They don't want to live that way. And it's not just the politicians, it's the celebrities that'll go there. To some extent, Greta Thunberg falls under the celebrity category at this stage.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
You've got people like Leonardo DiCaprio. Will he go there this time? I don't know. But if he does, he won't be traveling commercial. Will Sting go there? I don't know. But if he does, he won't be traveling commercial. It's crazy.
The big difference between the conference that we just put on in Las Vegas, ICCC 14, and the COP26 conference is the fact that we discuss science. We put up graphs and charts and figures and facts in our conference. At COP26, it's all going to be about emotions, and it's all going to be about politics, and it's all going to be about lecturing the little people. There's really no science being discussed. From their standpoint, the science is settled. There's nothing to discuss in that arena. They believe really that we're going to hell in a handbasket, and climate change is going to, do all kinds of terrible things to us in the future. There are some groups that even think climate change is going to cause extinction of the human race. I mean, they are that crazy about it. Now, I want to point out something really simple about climate change. We're talking about 1.5 degrees to 2 degrees centigrade temperature difference. That translates to about 2 to 3 degrees Fahrenheit, right? So a lot of people move from, let's say, New York down to Miami. They go to retirement there. And the temperature differential, average temperature differential, is like 15, 20 degrees. How many people, immediately die when they go to Florida because of the temperature differential?
Let's
the whole
be
thing's
clear.
Crazy.
Yeah, let's be clear. People don't retire to Duluth, Minnesota, or
no,
or to Fargo, North Dakota.
Yeah, no, they don't go there.
They retire to Crossville, Tennessee. That's a big retirement community. Arizona, that's cold there, and Florida.
So what's interesting, Anthony, you mentioned that some groups are claiming that global warming will make the human race extinct. Mm-hmm. But it's only partially true what you said, because it's not some groups. It's the United Nations itself. They just put out a video. Maybe Andy will be able to pull it up, where they have this talking dinosaur telling us that we are making ourselves extinct. So what you said is right, but it goes beyond just a few fringe groups. Yeah. This is what the idiotic United Nations wants us to believe. And we're supposed to take them seriously at their climate conference when they're telling us we're going to go extinct because of global warming. Grow up. No wonder why no one believes you.
Yeah, let's absolutely play the video now.
Yeah, let's play the video.
Yeah, for those that haven't seen this video is just hilarious, but let me run it.
Listen up, people. I know a thing or two about extinction. And let me tell you, and you'd kind of think this would be obvious, going extinct is a bad thing.
Ooh, really, really insightful commentary there. You don't want to go extinct.
Yeah, I like the fact that they chose a velociraptor, because if you actually let a velociraptor that size loose in the United Nations, hey, problem solved. No more United Nations.
Play a little bit more of that, Andy.
Extinct? In 70 million years, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. At least we had an asteroid. What's your excuse? You're headed for a climate disaster, and yet every year governments spend hundreds of billions of public funds on fossil fuel subsidies. Imagine if we had spent hundreds of billions per year subsidizing giant meteors. That's what you're doing right now. So here's my wild idea. Don't choose extinction. Save your species before it's too late.
Let's be clear. What killed the dinosaurs was the meteor crash, but what wiped out the vast majority of them was not the crash itself, but the global cooling that occurred after
As a result of the
fires
meteor
and the
strike.
dust kicked up and blocked out the sun. It was cold that killed the dinosaurs, not heat. They would have liked it a little bit warmer than it is today, not colder. And
Yeah,
we've
in
been a
fact, the
long,
dinosaurs lived in a
slow
period much
cooling
warmer than
decline since then.
These folks are so dishonest in their messaging and what they tell us. You're choosing to go extinct. Even the crackpot scientists who are being paid for and working for environmental extremist organizations don't say that we are going to be extinct. They talk about these fictitious crises that they predict that never come true, but it is idiotic. It is implausible. It is stupid on its face to say that we are making ourselves go extinct. And yet this isn't some fringe group that's saying it. It's the United Nations. This is their UN video. And again, and then they want us to take them seriously. They want us to go through all these programs. And when they talk about when they have Freddy the dinosaur or whatever his pea-brained head, pea-brained voices.
That is
when he says, when you're subsidizing, why are you subsidizing fossil fuels? There's virtually none. I don't know if other countries do it. I can't speak to them and whatever dictatorships do. But in the United States, there's virtually no subsidies whatsoever for any energy sources that are conventional energy. Almost all the subsidies go to wind and solar. Wind power by itself receives more subsidies than all conventional energy sources combined. The Obama Energy Information Administration reported that. The same thing for solar power. Solar power by itself receives more subsidies than all energy sources combined. These people that lie, they deceive, they make up garbage to frighten people. They throw in some extinct species. Actually, it's a good thing that they use a dinosaur because our so-called climate crisis is just as real as that dinosaur is.
What they're ignoring is that fossil fuels have driven the development that, in direct opposite of what they're saying, we're not making ourselves extinct. We're in fact living longer. More people are living. We're better fed than we've ever been before, and that's because of fossil fuels. The climate deaths related to climate disasters are down 99% over the last 100 years of global warming.
Right.
Deaths due to
crop
extreme
yields are up
heat
too.
and cold, deaths due to temperatures, non-optimum temperatures, way down. Thousands, tens of thousands each year because more people die from cold than heat, folks. They just, like James says, they just lie.
It's not just that they lie, that they actually believe their own lies. That's the problem. They don't look at the science. You only just have to scratch the surface barely on a lot of these claims and find that the truth behind it is, there. And these claims are over-fabricated. I saw a press release the other day coming from one of the outfits that's going to COP26, and they claimed runaway climate change. Really? The temperature has stayed almost steady for the last 20 years, and it's hardly varied. The big giant leap that was predicted back in 1988 by Hansen at NASA hasn't happened. We warmed modestly, sure, a little bit, but some of that is natural. Yeah, maybe some's related to CO2, but there's also a natural component, and they ignore all that. They are absolutely certain that, CO2 is the giant control knob for climate, when in fact we live in a very, very complex world, and climate is controlled by multiple things: ocean currents, solar radiation, even the amount of dust in the air, those kinds of things, volcanoes. All these things factor in, but they're convinced that CO2 is the giant control knob and nothing else matters. The fact of the matter is when you study that and you look at all the data, you find that there's all kinds of other influences.
I think you're being far too charitable, Anthony. I don't think they believe it. There may be some few people that actually believe this stuff. Most of them know it's a lie. It's about controlling people's lives. It's about giving more power to domestic governments and international agencies over people's lives. And how do we know this? Their own people say it. Their own people say it. This is the Great Reset. This is the way to remake society so it is more, whatever they want to say, equitable. We need to transfer wealth. Transferring wealth has nothing to do with controlling the temperature knob.
Yeah, so an early example before we were even talking about the Great Reset that goes along with your point, Sterling, is that Saikat Chakrabarty, the chief of staff for AOC, when they released the rough copy of the Green New Deal, he literally said, "Oh, you all think this is a climate thing? We see it as more of a remaking the economy thing."
Well,
So
Figueres,
this goes back a long way. You're absolutely right.
Christina Figueres, who was running the IPCC for a while, a few years ago, she said, "This is our chance to remake society."
Mhm.
And it wasn't because she was afraid of climate change. It was because she wanted to remake society. She had a vision of how the world should be.
So
And developing countries should not develop. They don't want development. They just want to take from developed countries and transfer wealth to them.
So what's interesting is if you had played the remainder of that video, and of course, it goes on. We don't want to spend minutes, several minutes playing that video of Freddie the dinosaur, whatever his name is.
Small business.
So at the end of that, he makes that very pitch. He states, "This is a tremendous opportunity that the COVID pandemic has given us a tremendous opportunity to remake society." This is the United Nations video that instead of acknowledging the number of people who have died around the world, the number of people who have been put into hospitals, the number of people whose health has been sickened by the virus and even by the vaccine, and the amount of freedom and liberty that we've given up. No, it's a tremendous opportunity. That's what they view it as. Now, if it really is this climate crisis, let me ask this. I mentioned this is a CO2 super spreader event with all the travel that'll be going on to and from Scotland, how America's delegation will be taking separate private jets because they can't even take their own communal private jet. But when they're in Scotland, when they're in Glasgow, if they really mean it, if they really want us to follow their advice, well, then I'm hoping that maybe Joe Biden will be bunking with Macron or Trudeau or whoever else shows up, because it's going to be cold there. The temperatures are supposed to be in the 40s for high temperature and in the 30s at night. So if they can bunk together, they can save on heating bills because you won't be heating as many hotel rooms. I'm going to be looking for that. And we'll see whether the media will show Joe Biden and several other rulers bunking together to save on heating costs. Because if we are facing this crisis, this existential crisis, that there's nothing that's too great for us to give up for it, well, then they can at least kind of share a room for a couple days, can't they?
Yeah, wearing their long underwear, keeping their thermostats, keeping their heat off, wearing the long underwear, living the lifestyle they espouse for the rest of us.
The other interesting thing I found in that video going on with it is that at one point they say we put all these subsidies into fossil fuels, and then they say that's akin to subsidizing the meteor that killed the dinosaurs. What that statement actually means when you boil it down is that fossil fuels have no advantage. They're purely an extinction, like leading towards an extinction event. They don't even acknowledge the amount of human growth that fossil fuels have allowed us. How the Industrial Revolution, where we really moved towards all this, was probably the greatest thing that's happened for human health in our history.
Yeah, the greening.
They don't even acknowledge the fact that they don't even acknowledge the fact that fossil fuels is what makes this conference possible.
Yeah,
getting there in their jets, lighting the auditorium, providing electricity to run the projectors. All of these things are based on fossil fuels, or at least some, or in part, and they don't even acknowledge that they couldn't even hold this conference without it.
Mm-hmm.
But if they're buying carbon credits from Al Gore, you're supposed to forget that.
Yeah,
right.
I've looked a lot of those
otherwise known as indulgences
scams too.
Yeah, exactly.
We also just got a comment from a guy named John that says, "Are you really that stupid?" So John apparently is on the side.
Is he asking of the UN or us?
But that I'm not sure of. But John, if you've listened to anything or watched other things we've done, you'd realize we're right here. But I mean, the whole video is just propaganda, probably aimed at younger generations, because I don't think many older people.
You want to put younger generations off the anti-fossil fuel bandwagon. Take away their iPhones and their pads, their Kindles, their laptops. Say, look, every time you charge these things or run these things, you're killing the planet according to your own point of view. So we're going to help you as parents save the planet. We're taking these devices away from you, and you can play in the yard. Well, bundle up and play in the yard in the winter, and you can discover the great outdoors like we used to do when we were kids. No more television, because we got to turn that off when you're not around, because we as parents may not believe that the world is ending. But the point is, make those kids feel what it's like to live without fossil fuels. Take away all their plastics, any toys, any games, anything they have that has plastic, because that's fossil fuels. Take away all those things that fossil fuels make possible, and then see how long they are worried about the climate crisis.
Yeah, even going down to clothes. Some clothes, synthetics.
Oh yeah,
are made from fossil fuels. So, let them run around naked without their iPads, and let's see how that works.
So what's interesting, getting to the prescriptive solutions, the United States is reducing its carbon dioxide emissions. If you believe in a climate crisis, if you believe we should do something, we have reduced this century our emissions more than any other nation in the world. In fact, the Western democracies as a whole have been reducing emissions. And yet we're told the problem is the continuing growth, the rapid growth in carbon dioxide emissions. So where does that leave you? It leaves you with the fact that China by itself is responsible for about 75% in the growth in carbon dioxide emissions during this century. And if you add on India, now you're up closer to 90%, and the rest is by the developing world. And what are we told we have to do in Glasgow, in the Paris Accords, and elsewhere? We're told that the United States, especially, and the Western democracies as a whole, need to give money to the developing world and these climate reparations. Folks, look, I don't blame developing countries for wanting to use affordable, reliable energy. They're not the bad guys. But if you're saying that we need to restrict and reduce carbon dioxide emissions, you're barking up the wrong tree when you're pointing the finger at the United Nations and Western democracies.
That's right. Well, they say, oh, well, the U.S. used to be the biggest emitter, and historically, okay, but that's history. You know what? We can't do anything about history. We can do, if you really believe humans are causing climate change, we can do something about going forward. But we don't get at going forward by restraining carbon emissions from developed countries. We have to get it from halting the growth of carbon emissions from developing countries, primarily China, which emits more greenhouse gases than all other developed countries combined. More than double the U.S. emissions. India, the third largest single emitter of greenhouse gases and growing fast. And like James says, I don't blame them. I wouldn't want to be poor either. I want what the West has if I'm poor. And to say that what we're offering instead is the equivalent of the pandemic relief stuff. You guys stay home, don't develop, don't get new energy, and we'll send you some money every so often. I mean, that's what it is they want the developed world to stay home while they take their private jets home from the conference and then gas them up for the next conference.
This is just like it was behind the Iron Curtain. The elite had all this stuff, and everybody else had to ride bicycles or Trabants.
And then cut them checks. You guys stay home, live in your huts. We'll cut you a little bit of a check every year.
Yeah. Also, piggybacking on what you just said, I've always found the idea that the United States and the developed world did go through these industrial revolutions where we did emit a ton of not just CO2, but things that, are actually dangerous. Yeah. But then we get to a point where now that we've gotten enough wealth as a country that we consider environmental stewardship a societal value, which we do, which we should, we've decided that developed countries now have to go through this alternate path to actually enrich or to build more wealth themselves. I mean, I genuinely find that view to a degree, and I don't want to use too strong of a word here, but evil. We know these people.
It's paternalistic. It's
the most paternalistic view I've heard.
It's green colonialism is what it is.
Yeah.
We know best how they ought to develop and live.
Exactly. Don't
follow our path. Oh, we're terrible. We're not giving anything up really, but we're terrible. But don't do as we say, not as we do. And that doesn't work very often with children for very long. And it certainly shouldn't work for leaders of developing countries. And the evidence is it doesn't. China's not giving up coal.
No.
India's not giving up coal. The developing world is building coal fuel power plants as fast as they can. And they're also trying to develop their oil and gas reserves as fast as they can. So they're not fooled.
You're talking too many facts, Sterling. So let's get back to things that make us feel good and are emotional. So here's my
there you go.
challenge to the three of you,
Okay.
as I will be in Glasgow in this cold, rainy environment that everybody there believes me would love to have a warmer climate. But here's the question. Can any of you get me an interview, an audience with Greta? I mean, if I'm going to fly all the way to Scotland, I need to see Greta. We need to talk. I guess she's not old enough for a beer yet, but we'll sit together over a Shirley Temple and we'll talk about climate change.
She won't.
that I
She
would-
won't.
I don't
You,
have
you
any
won't
Greta
talk about
contact.
it.
Sorry.
You won't. She won't talk to you. She'll lecture you.
You sure?
'Cause that's
I'm
what she
gonna-
does, right? You know, she does. I've never seen her once have a conversation.
She's good at scolding
I've seen
too.
her yell and get upset and shake
use your
and
many
turn red.
charms to get her into the same room with me for a friendly conversation.
You know what you could do, James, to get attention, and maybe it would capture her imagination or her ire, is to go to Staples and get those easy buttons. You know, that was easy. Get those reprogrammed and say, "How dare you? How dare you? How dare you?"
There you go.
Distribute a few of those, and then maybe that'll get her attention.
Well, I'm hoping that somehow one of you will be able to get me some time to chum around with Greta. If not, I do think it's entirely appropriate that this conference is occurring in the land of the Loch Ness monster. I mean, this is something that we've been told, this mythical creature that we're told exists, but no one's ever able to actually see and identify. So, I mean, here we have our climate crisis that we're told is another thing that exists. You just can never see it. Take our word for it. The two might be hanging out together. So perhaps I'll have to go up to Loch Ness and see if I can find them. If I can find
Maybe we
one, I'm
should
sure I
do a
can find the
video.
other.
Maybe we should do a CGI animated video where the Loch Ness monster comes and talks to us about
What do you mean
being
CGI
invisible and
animated
all that
video? The
stuff.
Loch Ness monster is real, just like the climate crisis.
And
If I find one, I know I'm going to
Sasquatch
find
and-
the other.
Yeah, and Bigfoot and the Chupacabra. They're all out there, but they're vanishingly hard to capture on film, despite the fact that, as far as I can tell, nothing that goes on in public anymore isn't filmed by somebody with their phone.
Yeah, we're going extinct. Haven't you noticed all of the vacant homes all across the country because we don't have enough people to populate them anymore because we're just dropping like flies because of the climate crisis?
That's a great strategy for buying real estate. Hey, we're going extinct in the near future. You're going to have a glut of homes, so bring the price down.
Hey, gee,
Better
I'm sure,
sell to me now while you
there's
can.
I'm sure there's no personal interest in that last as you make your move. Yeah.
So when you're in-
Just convince everyone in the community you're looking to move to, Anthony, that the whole place is about to be underwater. I've been a climate skeptic, but now I'm convinced. You better move.
Yeah,
that's why Obama's still
That's
buying
good.
beachfront
That's good.
properties.
Yeah,
He
the
knows
entire
they'll be
state of
underwater.
Florida is going to be underwater, according to some people. And yet
I'm
people still move
willing.
there.
Just tell them you're willing to take the hit.
I'll take one for the team.
You'll take one for the team. Yeah, like Obama, like you said. So Obama leaves the White House. He said that the planet is going to flood before and after.
Yep.
He left the White House. That sea levels are rising, and the first real estate that he purchases is on a barrier island less than 1 foot above sea level near the shore. Not near the shore, on the shore. That tells you how worried he is.
Yeah, right.
About sea level rise. Now, I will say this: there's always the off chance that he didn't enrich himself enough while he was president. And since that, instead, what he's done is he's really, really overinsured his house, and he's waiting for the tides to roll in so he can collect. But I don't think that's the case. Yeah.
So your comment, as amusingly illuminative as it is, calls to mind something that I do want viewers to know. We've alluded to the fact I'll be in Scotland. We at the Heartland Institute are putting on our Climate Reality Forum.
Yeah.
It's going to be November 2nd and 3rd. It will be, I believe, from 8 a.m. until noon East Coast time, U.S. East Coast time. We'll be live streaming it. You can comment. You can ask us questions. We are going to have. We'll be doing this. The Heartland Institute is hosting it, but we also have our friends and allies from the CFACT, the Committee for a Constructive Tomorrow. Also, Clintel, which is an organization in Europe that deals with climate change issues from a realist perspective, the European Institute of Climate and Energy, the Global Warming Policy Foundation, and others. So we're going to have a cooperative group that's going to present much of the science. So sea level, as Sterling illustrates, if Barack Obama really believed that the seas are rapidly rising and are going to drown New York City and everything else, he certainly wouldn't be building on a barrier island that's even more vulnerable than New York City or Miami or whatever else. We're going to present the science that illustrates why we're not facing a climate crisis, how the asserted climate apocalypse and all these extreme weather events and results are not occurring. Objectively, factually, provably, they're not occurring. And whereas at the United Nations, they're going to be talking about emotions and how we have to all get on board and all that stuff. They're not going to present facts. They're not going to present data. They're not going to present science. It's not the point. But we'll be presenting that. So I hope folks will tune in. You can tune in on the Heartland Institute's website, heartland.org. And I think it'll make a great difference if people are paying attention.
There's one thing I want to mention here. This is a news story that just came out today, and I'll say it real quick. There's a fellow in UK by the name of James Lovelock. He's a scientist. He's well respected. He's been on the BBC and all these things. He's written a couple of books about Gaia and how Gaia is fighting back against climate change. The humans are doing nasty things to Gaia. Headline from NBC News today. Scientist James Lovelock, I was an alarmist about climate change and I was wrong. This is the guy who's recanting after writing 2 books about it. And he says he overhyped it. It was too alarmist. Yes, climate change is happening, but it's not anything like it's being portrayed as being runaway or out of control or anything like that. And the reason
why the IPCC, the reason why COP26 is not talking about the science, because it was never about the science. Remember, even the body that is supposed to inform them of the science that informs the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, it isn't called a scientific body. It's called the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. The heads of it are chosen by politicians. The summaries are rewritten by politicians to fit the narrative. And if scientists disagree, they're welcome to be dropped from future input or resign. And many have resigned over the abuse and basically lies about what the science says.
We got a comment here from Catherine Burke who says something, and it really sums it up. She says, fear sells policy. And that's really what's going on here with this conference.
Yeah, I mean, strong emotions are definitely easier to convince someone than actual, which can be complicated fact, but that's, what Climate at a Glance does well. But we're at about the 30-minute mark. We were trying to keep it to that. James, I think you actually did a great job semi-closing it by letting our viewers know about the Climate Reality Forum. Do any of you, Anthony, Sterling, James, do you have any last words you want our listeners to hear before we wrap up?
Well, I would say, don't worry, be happy. Climate change has actually been beneficial for us for the last century.
Let's get a little Bob Marley in here.
There you go.
I think it's
Bobby McFerrin.
People all over the world would like to kill you for delivering good news, Anthony. I don't understand it, but that's basically the way the state of this discussion is. And no, Anthony's right. Sterling is right. There's no reason for us to hate ourselves, to punish ourselves, to destroy our economy, to take away our freedoms and liberties. The so-called climate crisis does not exist. We are not going extinct. It's a tremendous amount of good news that we've benefited from as the climate has moderately warmed, and we're going to present that in Glasgow at the same time, the same location as the United Nations Summit. So tune in next week.
Great. Well, with that, we'll wrap up. Thank you, listeners/viewers, I guess usually it's podcasts, for joining us today. We plan to do these on as many Fridays as we possibly can, so look out for that. Sterling holds our Environment and Climate News podcast. Make sure you subscribe to that on Apple Podcasts if you haven't already. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're doing climate discussions like this all the time, as well as videos covering other topics. And we have tons of videos of our recent climate conference in Vegas. Outside of that, everyone, say goodbye to the viewers.
Take care.
Goodbye.
And happy Halloween to all. I'm wearing my my pumpkin ghost tie here.
I actually appreciate that. All right. Bye, everyone.